Hello, and welcome back to Dear Esther, Landmark Edition. It took more days than I would have liked to get back to this game, and it's later in the day than I'd like it to be, so, you know, everything is as it should be. So let's not waste too much time. I want to complete the second half of the dev commentary, which is on, right? Oh, well, I guess resume. It should be on. Yeah, the second half of the game, chapter 3 and 4, and the dev commentary there. Should have time to do that. We'll have to see. I mean, I'll push for doing it regardless, because that's it. We just have that, and should get the last achievement on the way as well. And why prolong this any further? Yep, okay, dev commentary is turned on. Good. So let's get going.
The caves in the game are really interesting because it's a very tonal shift.
Yep.
Within the whole visual look of the game. It's kind of like this more organic, more surreal, dreamlike landscape compared to what you're used to before this point. It's we kind of used the visuals and this kind of unreal theme very subtly, but here it's kind of at the forefront, and to me it's kind of been designed as this kind of journey through the inner self, through the body, and it's really designed to be a very different experience compared to the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of why I like it, because it comes out of nowhere and it's just like, suddenly you're not just on a normal-ish looking island and you're in this fantastical cave. Also, am I seeing... Hold on. I thought I was seeing some, like, frame drops again and stutters. Not sure. I checked last episode, or last part, last stream, and that seemed fine. So the first one was terrible. The second one seemed pretty much fine from what I could tell. And this one seems like it might be struggling again. Maybe it's just like to do with the day. Like maybe Fridays and Saturdays are just like at this time that I normally stream. Maybe Twitch is just, I don't know, more heavily taxed or whatever. So, well, sorry if there's stutters. I don't think I can do anything about it, and I don't really think it's my fault. But oh well.
This, for me, is probably the most pivotal music cue in the game, and it's the one that most people write to me about to say that they are absolutely obsessed with and they love. It's the only music cue that has singing. It has a female voice, and I think that's a really important shift for me, that you've gone from this beautiful string music, but it's quite abstract, into what is effectively a song, and with lyrics, so you're actually explicitly saying something as a composer at this point. The other thing that I think it's important to say for me is it's the biggest...
It's very, very loud compared to her voice, though. I mean, the music is great, but... it's kind of a shame. At least we have subtitles, I suppose.
Shift from the music that I wrote for the mod. It's the same music, but the act of having it sung by an amazing singer. I sang it on the original, and it's really bad. And Clara Sanabras really
didn't know that.
It. And it's what good actors do, it's what Nigel Carrington did, it's what good musicians do, and they take something that you've created and they just shove it up into the next level and make something that's good into something really extraordinary. And also for me, I think it's a point where the environment art and the music just meld so beautifully and so seamlessly into one. I mean, on a personal level, I've played the game hundreds of times now, and I still enter the caves and I look at Rob's work and I'm just absolutely overawed, just gobsmacked by its beauty. And I just think it's a really magical moment in gaming for me, actually. I know that probably sounds really dramatic, but I just think it absolutely hits something where everything just works together. And the music is so dreamlike. You know, Rob has talked about the journey through the body, and I think that's absolutely, for me, the music becomes so organic and fluid and actually very feminine and female at that point. You're hearing the voice of his love.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I really like this area, like I've said, and the atmosphere and the music goes along with it, not just the art. It's just very good. Not really much more to say about it than that.
I just want to say that I think you can divide caves in games into pre and post Dear Esther. I think that it's just a way of breaking away from reality into saying what you can do with these spaces that actually makes them this incredibly, much more vividly colourful and much more kind of interpretative and look for it. And it's really interesting that I look at caves now in games and I find myself going, that's a very Rob Briscoe cave.
Okay, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, sure, but I don't really think it revolutionized caves in games in that sense. It's great. It's a very nice looking area, but you know, I don't think it was like the first of its kind, this kind of scenery. But what do I know? Maybe.
I think that's an amazing thing to have achieved. So I think it's one of those. It's great paying other people's work compliments. I enjoy that because you never feel like you're being big-headed about yourself. But I think it is. I think particularly it does come again down to that blend between the audio and visuals that just it's a real high watermark. I kind of it's one of the areas in all of the games we've made that I'm most proud of.
I think as well, you think you know what you're getting with Dear Esther for the first 45 minutes of the game, wherever we are at this point, and then you step into something completely unexpected and completely new, and I think it just throws the player such a curveball in such a wonderful way.
Like I've been saying, that's why I like it, because it is so unexpected. But yeah, about the whole like inspiring things, I wonder like if he has any examples, like what are the kind of games that made caves based on Dear Esther or have a similar look? Because I mean, I don't know, the closest thing I can think of is like a story about your a story about my uncle. That's what it's called. A Story About My Uncle. This is a really good first-person puzzle platformer that also has like pretty amazing cave scenery. Not quite to this extent, and that's why I don't really feel like it was inspired by Dear Esther, but I don't know. Who am I to say?
I think when you're designing a game, it's very easy to get very locked into what the system can do. And you're trying to deal with all the different variations of things that if a player does this, then this. And we have to deal with the consequence here. And our lead designer, Andrew, and I talk about this all the time, about you might have an idea, but then how does this radiate out throughout the entire system? And you get very caught in the idea of what the system has to be and how robust the system has to be and this kind of thing. And I think what's really important as a sort of a designer, as a creative, is that understanding that actually the real game is happening in the player's head. And that the system can be whatever you want it to be, but if the game isn't running in the player's head as opposed to on the screen, then you're missing a trick. You're not letting the game be everything it could be. And I think the great thing about working with a game as simple as Esther in a way is that those sort of consequences of player interaction, there's not a huge number of them in the way that there might be with a very mechanically complex game. So you can really heavily focus on what is the game experience that's being played out within the player's sort of mind and heart at the moment. And there are other, sort of, I know this is a kind of a way of approaching game design that has become increasingly popular over the last few years, and that Journey was a really, really good example of that game company really focusing on what's the emotional experience of playing this game. But I think, again, it's probably one of the reasons why Esther has lasted as long as it has done, because it's not a mechanical exercise, it's an exercise in trying to inspire you as a player to have the deepest experience and the deepest engagement and to really run the game in your own head rather than being something that you're sitting 6 feet away from kind of interacting with. I hate interaction as a term for that. I think it becomes very cold and mechanical and systems driven, and really interaction is completely trivial and pointless if there isn't an emotional engagement with the player and you haven't moved it away from the screen and into the player's head.
Well, that was a lot of words. I guess? I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that. I suppose it depends on the kind of game, I guess. Like, there are some games that are very mechanically focused and therefore engaging. You don't necessarily have to have, like, an engaging story or an engaging, like, feel where you get into the player's head through just, I don't know, it's like the type of experience that Dear Esther is very different from most types of games, but I don't think it's like Dear Esther doesn't do anything better than any other game. It's just a different way of doing it. So, I don't know. I mean, as I've said, it was revolutionary back when it came out. It was like one of the first walking simulators. Nothing quite like it had ever been seen before. So, I don't know. I'll just take his word for it.
What's really important to me is that Dear Esther started out as a Half-Life 2 mod. And
Speaking of, I do want to, at some point, try out the original mod. I think that would be fun. Maybe even, like, stream it or something, because I've never played it. As I've said, I played the original, well, the, like, remake Dear Esther on my own, so this is a replay, but that one I've never played, so that would be kind of a more interesting thing to look into as a streaming thing.
the Half-Life 2 modding community hadn't championed it and celebrated it and downloaded it a lot and talked about it and loved it, then it would never have been a game. So it's never really bothered me, the kind of is it a game conversation, because as far as I can see it, Dear Esther and like everything that's come after it that's been inspired by it, this was championed by Half-Life 2 modders, and they made it what it is. And so if you've made something that the real kind of hardcore of the hardcore, in terms of these are first-person shooter modders, have gone, this is really good and really special and we're behind this, then you've already got the support of a really amazing gaming community, and the fact that they championed it, we owe them a huge amount in terms of where we are. And I'm really proud to come out of that scene. I'm really proud to be a company and to be sitting here talking about a game that started life as a mod.
Yeah, I think they're the ones that have really kind of like pushed us forward and given us the passion to be able to take it to a commercial level and give us the confidence to make us believe that there's an audience for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think that's actually a good point, that, like, I mean, it's been a while since I saw any games that started as mods. I'm sure there are plenty still, but just having that kind of thing where you start by making a game as a mod, then you already have a community that will, like, there's already a player base that is interested just from the get-go because they are player bases of that game that you're making a mod for. So even if it's a very different game from most other mods in that game, it's still like you have some common ground which can help you, like, take off. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games that have started as mods in different games and ended up being huge. I mean, there's like infinite different examples, but yeah, just kind of an interesting way to look at it. I wonder what the next, like, big mod thing is gonna be. Like, we have Half-Life mods, and we have, like, Warcraft mods, and we've had whatever else. Like, is there gonna be another big game that enables people to, like, make things? I mean, it's like Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, and whatever. Like, sure, that has tons of mods, but it's not really the kind of mods that spawn new things that branch off from the main game of Elder Scrolls. So, I don't know, just completely unrelated, but just kind of an interesting thought, I suppose.
Dear Esther was my first foray into writing music for games, and I actually approached it very traditionally, so more as a film score than a traditional interactive game music score.
I can see that.
And what's really interesting for me is that the lack of interactivity in the music was never a problem for anybody that played the game. And that's a separate discussion, but there's a big schism between game music composers of how much the music should be following the player at all times in terms of interactive music. But one of the reasons I wanted to say something at this point was that this was my little first journey into thinking about how you write music for games rather than films. So I had this song that was a certain length, and Dan said, well, we don't know how long the player is going to take to traverse through that space. And I thought, oh no, he's right, and slightly panicked. So this was a very simple solution where the song was split in half, and then I wrote some drone music that could just play for as long as was needed as the player walked through the space, and then the second half of the song would seamlessly play.
Huh.
And it's very, very simple, but it's quite emblematic for me in terms of my career, because it was the first time that I had to think about the player. Because with film music, it's so simple. You know exactly what's going to happen when. But this concept of interactivity was so new for me. So I kind of look back at it fondly because it's quite a basic approach to, compared to something like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, where that was an open world adventure where I had to really think about the player and their movement through the space. So I kind of look on this very fondly, this moment in the game.
That is a very interesting thing. Because I haven't even noticed, and I think that's kind of a good sign, a sign of good music making in games, that you don't notice things like, apparently, I didn't even know it did this, but like it has a distinct theme, a song that plays, but then like it gets to a point where it's like, okay, you're taking too long to get to the like next major moment, therefore it just plays like, yeah, drone music that just goes on for as long as you need it. And then when you finally advance to that like distinct point, then the like real finish, the finale to the song happens. And that's really interesting, because usually you just have like looping music. You just have a minute or two of a track that then just repeats ad nauseum until, is that even that, wait, no, that's wrong. Ad infinitum? I don't even know. Until you just get out of that area. So yeah, that's done really well. Let me check. Hold on out. Now I'm wondering. I guess ad nauseum actually does work in that context. Sure. Not really what I was going for, but it works. Alright. It might be, the urn might be here that didn't count, but I'm pretty sure it's the one in chapter 4, so we'll see.
The paper origami boats first came into things with Esther.
Oh yeah, the boats over there.
But it felt like a really amazing metaphor of taking these letters and folding them into boats and then letting them leave the island, because you kind of, at this point in the game, it's kind of the realization is there that this isn't going to end well, and that the narrator is never leaving the island. And the idea that this kind of, again, the idea of communication, or the attempt or failing communication, or trying to speak through the coma, or whatever it is, however you want to interpret it. But the idea of putting the boat in the underground river really felt like it kind of reinforced that sort of dreamlike kind of quality of the caves, of actually there's something really sad about this one boat, because when you see it go past, you know that...
You see it go past?
Even the boats aren't going to leave the island. Like, this is something which doesn't have a tidy, neat kind of like...
I think I miss that every time.
Even if you don't sort of think about it to that sort of level of depth, there's just something... It's one of those things that I really love about games that you can do, where it's just a moment that has a really distinct emotional tone to it, that you go... There's a pause when you see that boat goes past, that I just think is... Yeah, it's something special you can do with kind of media like games.
I guess I've missed that every time. There's supposed to be a little paper boat that floats down here, I suppose. I just saw the paper boats that, like, got stuck down there or whatever. Well, little details you miss, I suppose. That's also part of gaming. You can't necessarily tell the player what they should notice all the time.
In a lot of ways, the caves were the hardest area of the game to actually write because we knew we didn't want to have much voiceover in there. I think because of the strength of the music, and this goes right back to the original mod, we wanted that to be the voice and for it to be a chance for Esther to speak rather than the narrator. And we also wanted to have this break. So
Oh, the
when
singing
narrator
is
came
supposed
out
to be
from the
Esther.
caves, you had
Huh.
a real definite sense of something happening, and that he had changed as a result of this journey. So it meant it really felt wrong to have a lot of voiceover within there, but then that made it really difficult because then it was you had like 4 one-sentence lines in there, and each one of those had to have an absolute clarity and to really kind of work. So I think for me, it was really interesting. It's like the difference between writing kind of fiction and writing poetry. When you read really amazing poets and you have that incredible surgical precision where every single word is considered and placed so absolutely. And rather than being able to kind of, because the narrator rambles quite naturally, it was able to, you could kind of get into the flow of the narrator's ramble in other places in the level, and this was a real challenge because suddenly I was having to write like a poet of going every single one of these words, every single cadence, every single sound has to be absolutely perfect, or it'll just feel like the narrator's voice is intruding on the rest of the experience. So it was, yeah, I think definitely the most challenging area of the game as a writer.
Yeah, I think I did subconsciously notice that, like, the narration was a lot more sparse here in the caves, and it definitely didn't, like, explain as much. It was more just, yeah, dreamlike, short, just... I don't even know, but I don't really know exactly concrete examples, because I don't remember what is said when you're going through the caves here, since we have depth commentary on. But yeah, kind of cool, I suppose.
The sound here is a classic case of, again, what music I think does really well, which is you've had this soft, lyrical, beautiful, epic, dreamlike music, and then the moment you come out of the caves, you're into this really harsh soundscape, and the tonal shift is very brutal, I think, and deliberately so. You have very little music when you come out of the caves. You hear the wind, and it's a classic case of foreshadowing. So we know from this point
Help?
things are probably going to get bleaker, more difficult. And yeah, it's something that music does really well, I think, which is
There we go.
Emotional signalling and signposting.
Yeah. Good stuff. I was a little distracted, getting stuck in the pool.
This whole area moved, didn't it? The original mod, this was a
Yeah.
cave right at the beginning of the caves where
Yeah.
everything was written, and it moved to the back end of the level, and we had this long corridor that's full of these kind of
Wait, what?
it's the point of high madness, I think, in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of just where you feel like you're losing the plot completely. Both,
I agree.
like, visually and auditory, and you know, it's kind of like this really frenetic moment for me.
I think it's where you feel most that you're underneath a mountain, and you feel
Yeah.
the weight of that mountain, and just I loved the idea when we were, putting through it of what would it actually take to do this, like to actually paint all these symbols and what is going on, and it really is quite an explicit kind of thing of madness of going, you would have to be insane or very disturbed to actually do this, and what is the process that this person's trying to work through, what they trying to achieve by this. And I think it really strengthened it, making it a crawl through a tunnel as opposed to just a static location.
Yeah, I think it's the consistency and the coherence of
wow.
the symbols is a lot more.
Almost got
broken
interrupted
down
there.
as well. Like you see some symbols before, like scattered around the environments, but at this point they're like right in your face, and they're kind of just. It's just total madness, you know. Any kind of meanings have been crossed over and confused, and you know. I think it really helps to bring the tension up at this point at a level as well. So you're kind of coming out of this dreamlike state a little bit.
Yeah, you kind of know that you're getting towards the end of the serenity into something that's a bit more disturbed than that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I do think, like, up until the caves, the game is kind of more grounded And the story that you're hearing, just like, oh, it's melancholic, it's like, you know, kind of depressing and stuff, but it's still normal. And yeah, here it just goes completely out the other end, and I guess, yeah, the whole madness thing kind of showcases how things are probably more dreamlike and more surreal than, like, the physical landscape you're going through or something.
This is a bit more of a contentious one because we disagree on this one. I struggle with this. With the points in the caves where you duck above and below the water, and you have to have that transition of audio. And I love the audio on both sides of the surface tension of the water, but I really struggle with you breaking water because it's such a hard edge to the sound. And I don't think there's any other way around that. And you need to have those moments where you do go underwater because it's so important. But it's one of the areas that's never sat very comfortably with me because I feel like in a level which hasn't got a single edge in it, it's the one edge within it and it breaks me.
And that's why I think it's so successful, because you've been lured into this completely hallucinatory, dreamlike world, and then all of a sudden, as a player, you're literally gasping for breath. You're coming up for air. And I think when we're talking about that metaphor of the body, for me, it's so about birth, and it's about this coming through the water, and actually it's a moment of realisation for me, but you're having to go back under again and you're diving down. So for me, without wanting to sound incredibly pretentious, it's about the fight between the conscious and the subconscious and that struggle. Booyah!
There's actually a really interesting thing about that underwater section there, though, is that, I don't know if you remember, but you had a certain piece of music that plays when you're underwater, and to me, I really like that. It's kind of like, because at this point, it's kind of like a very calm, relaxed type of a journey, and you go on the water and it starts to break apart a little bit, and it's almost like, you know, that kind of psychosis is still there. It's not complete bliss at this point, and and it helps to build the atmosphere up to this final jump.
So we're both saying that Dan's wrong?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's good. That's the way it should be.
Alright, well, I mean, I don't think I agree with either party here. Like, I definitely, like I've said in the past, I'm not that much for, like, putting words to symbolism and stuff, and oh, it's about birth and all that. Like, to me, that's not really where my mind goes at all, but whatever you want to do, I suppose. But at the same time, I don't think it's, like, a bad thing to have. I do think it's kind of an interesting change in tone, and, like, I don't know, I remember the first time you, like, dive into water in the game. Back when I played it, it was kind of surprising. Like, wait, there's, like, water swimming mechanics, because previously when you swam out in the sea, you just kind of sank like a rock and died. But here in the cave, you actually do have to, like, swim underwater, and yeah, it is, like, an audio shift, and I do think it's done well, the, like, audio filtering and stuff, and I don't know, I don't really know why that Dan guy has a problem with the, like, abrupt shift of going below and above water. I think it's kind of, I just think it's done well, and I don't think it's, like, it doesn't break your immersion, or I don't even know. So yeah, kind of strange on both sides of that. Oh yeah, wait, wasn't I supposed to be able to see a ghost here? I might have already missed it because I was messing about so much. I'm pretty sure there was supposed to be a ghost, like, here. Let's see if I can get around. I don't think I can. I'll probably... Yeah, okay. You just get, like, sucked down. Fair enough. At least I didn't miss anything. Aha. Now we have this one. Oh, is it? It's like a different thing now? It's not the hospital bed, like last time?
The motorway scene. The biggest new addition to between the mod and the commercial version. This didn't exist in the mod at all. It was a completely new thing.
Huh. Wait, I didn't play the mod, right? Because like I said, I didn't remember this part at all. There's no way I played the mod. I mean, I have playtime in the original Steam release of Dear Esther, so that has to be it. But yeah, that's weird. I guess it's just because of the detail changes and stuff that I'm not remembering it. No idea.
Yeah, it's well, I wasn't sure where the idea spawned from to have this scene, whether I just sort of went off or we discussed it, or I can't remember, you know.
I can't remember. Can you remember? It just kind of appeared, didn't it? And then
Yeah, it was just this kind of. I think for me, actually, I remember being some technical difficulty between the drop and then coming out at the end part, but it was like it was the same thing that we dealt with in the past of like, how do we not kill the player? From a technical standpoint, I think it might have been something to do that, but it was also, you know, I can't remember where the whole thing came from.
I think it's my favourite point in the whole game, actually.
Didn't you say that the caves were your the favorite point of the game?
I think it's just it's quite shocking, and it's so surreal, and it's so beautiful. And from an audio point of view, you have that baby's heartbeat bringing us back to the
Oh, that's
idea
what
of
it
the
is?
ultrasound. Was Esther pregnant? And it's one of those moments that I think everything just kind of collates together, and it's so unexpected.
Yeah, for me, it's like a moment of realization.
Yes.
It's like it's, you know, it's coming to terms with something almost, you know.
whether or not what actually is going on at the moment is real, this did happen. There's kind of an absolute. I remember playtesting it, and I didn't know that the car can get switched out with a hospital gurney.
Yeah.
And I must have played it. I was like 3 or 4 times into playtesting it, and the first time it switched out and it was a gurney instead. I really remember kind of sitting there and going, "Oh God, that's just," and really being just stopped in my tracks by it. And it's one of those weird things you get when you're making a game that you know you'll never have those moments that a player does, where you know it all so well. It's really, really rare to be in a situation where you actually get a genuine, fresh player's eye view on what you're making.
Yeah, I was always a bit worried that it was maybe a bit too literal. Like we gone a bit too literal with that. But I think looking back at it now,
I have no idea what the literal meaning of the, like, gurney with the coins is all about. What were the coins? What are they supposed to mean in terms of the story? Maybe maybe that's just a detail that happened for me and isn't there every time. I have no idea.
there's still a lot of strangeness going on there. Obviously, the whole scene is unusual, but there's still these like very subtle details that are there that kind of still making you think, what does that mean? Like, I think if you look closely, there's like coins
Yeah.
scattered around and things like that. It's
And for me, it's...
What does that mean?
Sorry to keep going on about it, but it's about layers of subconscious for me. That you start overground, you go into the caves, you go deeper, you're falling down... It's going down the rabbit hole, effectively. And then you go to the deepest level, and that's actually the truth. That's the reality. That's what happened.
Sound like they just cut off that conversation, really? Like it was supposed to continue? Do we see any coins like here when the gurney is not here? Is that a fossil? No. Nice voice crack. I guess that's just a car part. Coins? Are those coins? Oh no! No! Shit! No! What are you doing? Why? I wasn't going out. God damn it. No, there's nothing I can do. If I exit, resume, I'm gonna be back at the start of the caves, right? Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh man, that's annoying. So how about that run button? Now we're coming to the point where that would be really nice to have. Oh boy. And here I have to just wait. I guess it's just timed, that area. Maybe it's not about, like, how far out you go in it. It's just... Yeah, it's just timed. If you stay there for too long, you just get pulled out. And I stayed there for too long. That's kind of weird. Alright, let's just sprint through as fast as I possibly can. At the speed of lightning. Guess I can see the ghost again and the paper boat, so that's something. Don't even need to take that.
I just want to say that I think you can divide caves in games into pre and post Dear Esther. I think that it's just a way of breaking away from reality into saying what you can do with these spaces.
This might be like one of my favorite shots in the game. When you come up here, just this area, the visuals here are just really striking.
Caves now in games, and I find myself.
Bye.
I think when you're designing a game, it's very easy to get very locked into what the system can do. And you're trying to deal with all the different variations of things that if a player does this, then this. And we have to deal with the consequence here. And our lead designer, Andrew, and I talk about this all the time, about you might have an idea, but then how does this radiate out throughout the entire system? And you get very caught in the idea of what the system has to be and how robust the system has to be and this kind of thing. And I think what's really important as a sort of a designer, as a creative, is that understanding that actually the real game is happening in the player's head, and that the system can be whatever you want it to be, but if the game isn't running in the player's head as opposed to on the screen, then you're missing a trick. You're not letting the game be everything it could be. And I think the great thing about working with a game as simple as Esther in a way is that those sort of concepts. What's really important to me is that Dear Esther started out as a Half-Life 2 mod, and if the Half-Life 2 modding community hadn't championed it and celebrated it and downloaded it a lot and talked about it and loved it, then it would never have been a game. So it's never really bothered me, the kind of is it a game conversation, because as far as I can see it, Dear Esther and like everything that's come after it's been inspired by it. This was championed by Half-Life 2 mod.
Dear Esther was my first foray into writing music for games, and I actually approached it very traditionally, so more as a film score than a traditional interactive game music score. And what's really interesting for me is that the lack of interactivity in the music was never a problem for anybody that played the game. And that's a separate discussion, but there's a big schism between game music composers of how much the music should be following the player at all times in terms of interactive music. But one of the reasons I wanted to say something at this point was that this was my little.
I don't
know when the paper origami boats first came into things with Esther, really.
Hey, boat.
But it felt like a really
amazing I missed that.
Of taking these.
I vaguely remember it from maybe the first time I played the game.
You know, at this point in the game is kind of the realization.
But I don't know.
This isn't going to end well, and that the narrator is never leaving the island, and the idea that this kind of, again, the idea of communication, or the attempt or failing communication, or trying to speak through the coma, or whatever it is, however you want to interpret it. But the idea of putting the boat in the underground river really felt like it kind of reinforced that sort of dreamlike kind of quality of the caves, of actually there's something really sad about this one boat, because when in a lot of ways the caves were the hardest area of the game to actually write, because we knew we didn't want to have much voiceover in there. I think because of the strength of the music, and this goes right back to the original mod, we wanted that to be the voice and for it to be a chance for Esther to speak rather than the narrator. And we also wanted to have this break, so when the narrator came out from the caves, you had a real definite sense of something happening, and that he had changed as a result of this journey. So it meant it really felt wrong to have a lot of voiceover within there, but then that made it really difficult, because then it was, you had like 4 1-sentence.
The sound here is a classic case of, again, what music I think does really well, which is you've had this soft, lyrical, beautiful, epic, dreamlike music, and then the moment you come out of the caves, you're into this really harsh soundscape, and the tonal shift is very, very brutal, I think, and deliberately so. You have very little music when you...
This whole area moved, didn't it? The original mod, this was a
Yeah.
cave, right at the beginning of the caves where
Yeah.
everything was written, and it moved to the back end of the level, and we had this long corridor that's full of these kind of... it's the point of high madness, I think, in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of just where you feel like you're losing the plot completely, both like visually and auditory, and you know, it's kind of like this really frenetic moment for me.
I think it's where you feel most that you're underneath a mountain, and you feel
Yeah.
the weight of that mountain, and just I loved the idea when we were, you know, putting through it of what would it actually take to do this, like to actually paint all these symbols and what is going on, and it really is quite an explicit kind of thing of madness of going, you would have to be insane or very, very disturbed to actually do this, and what is the process that this person's trying to work through, what they
All right,
trying
think
to achieve.
Ghost is coming up pretty soon.
It, making it a crawl through a tunnel as opposed to just a static location.
Yeah, I think it's...
This is a bit more of a contentious one because we disagree on this one. I struggle with this, with the points in the caves where you duck above and below the water, and you have to have that transition of audio. And I love the audio on both sides of the surface tension of the water, but I really struggle with you breaking water because it's such a hard edge to the sound. And I don't think there's any other way around that. And you need to have those moments where you do go underwater because it's so important. But it's one of the areas that's never sat very comfortably with me because I feel like in a level which is hasn't got a single edge.
That's just a shadow, right?
One edge within it that breaks me.
And that's why I think it's so successful, because you've been lured into this completely hallucinatory, dreamlike world.
I wonder
and all of a
where
sudden,
this
as a
ghost is
player,
supposed to
you're
be.
literally gasping for breath.
Oh well.
You're coming up for air, and I think when we're talking about that,
Finally we're
metaphor of
back.
the body, for
That
me,
was
this is all
an annoying
about birth, and it's about
annoying
this coming
setback.
through the water.
Gurney
And
this
actually,
time?
it's
Yep.
The motorway scene, the biggest new addition to the between
All right,
the mod.
and now we can just go
and
here.
The commercial version. This didn't exist in the. So the admission really is that I did play fast and loose with the geography of the M5. There isn't actually a welcome break service. It's just outside the junction of Sanford. But
As
we
has
also
been
know,
pointed
as
out
has
to
been pointed
you.
out, players. I mean, what a thing if you make something that's based vaguely on somewhere in real life. In terms of a compliment, we're getting emails from players going, there isn't a welcome break there, and people really trying to work out where is this, and whole threads about where on the M5 it is. That's just the most amazing feeling. But I think what I really love about, what I think works really, really well in Esther, and again it's something that I think is really carried forward to our other games, is that a lot of the
I'm
time
getting
we're not
slower.
dealing with kind of like big, glamorous, amazing, epic places. It's a sort of like a ratty little island in the Hebrides. It's someone who lived in Wolverhampton. It's just outside, a service station on a stretch of the M5. And I think that earths what's going on. Gives it a realness as well, particularly when you sort of put it against the surrealness of the caves. Actually, you're kind of going, this is really surreal and this is really, really dreamlike. But actually, I'm talking about, a car accident just outside a little chef, and it kind of that playing off those two things against each other.
Oh,
It's like making
invisible
the
wall.
ordinary extraordinary.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, this area is interesting. I didn't think there was this much to explore in it. Oh, I thought that was a ghost. It's a sign. So now, I wonder when will I get pulled out? Because now I'm like kind of too far away, I think. There might be like a trigger that I'm now going around. Oh, there we go. Okay. I wonder how that's timed or when that happens. Okay. Good. Now we can advance.
This scene for me is like really, really iconic because it kind of brings this idea of the caves being an inward journey through the body together. It's really kind of like a symbol of rebirth, and it actually brings together a lot of the visual goals that I wanted to achieve.
Let's wait here.
With a lot of the symbolism in the game. Like, I've talked a little bit about how the environment was kind of designed to provoke emotions, and kind of the impressionistic style gives you just enough information to make you think of things and feel things. But this is probably like the antithesis of this. And the whole feeling of rebirth here is quite strong. I know Jess.
Yeah, the music's really supporting that.
Yeah,
because we've gone. She sings always, always throughout. You know, we've got
Oh, she does?
always, and then she sings never, and a moment of absolute soaring. It's the climax of the music.
As you come out of the water,
I didn't pick up on that at all.
Swells, and you just kind of, it is like a moment of change has happened in some way, and
it's rebirth, isn't it? For me, it's his moment of clarity and acceptance and understanding of the reality of what's happened.
And you're literally moving towards the light at the end of the tunnel. You're actually doing that as you go through.
But the music, especially, I think before the music got layered in, that scene was nowhere near as kind of powerful for me. Like, that kind of just totally made it.
Well, this is why the devlog is fun to listen to, because I didn't make that connection at all, and I didn't hear that she actually was singing real words, real lyrics, so that's nice to get pointed out. Alright, final chapter. How many things do we have to listen to? 16. And one more of these, yeah? About a quarter left.
Dan and I had worked on lots of projects together, non-game projects, before we made Dear Esther. And I think the thing that links all of the projects that we've worked on together is the idea of hidden stories and layers of stories. And one of the things I wanted to do with the music was...
The points seem pretty, like, scattered about here. Like, you can kind of go in a different order if you want.
To embed hidden little hints and stories into it. So the music that you hear here has Morse code. And Morse code is spelling out the word Esther. And I really, really
that's interesting. That's kind of an interesting thing to do in music. Like, you have a game and you make a theme, and to do that, you, like, take the literal thing that you're trying to make and you, like, translate it into music, and then you, like, have that as the base of the music. That's fascinating.
Of that some people would understand that it was Morse code and try and figure out what it was saying. It also provided a really interesting rhythmical dynamic. And yeah, it's just about these ideas of hidden stories and layers, but it also starts to emphasise the obsessional nature, I think, of the story in Dear Esther, and his agitation and actually slight panic. So you're getting this rhythm that just repeats and repeats and repeats obsessively. So I think even if you don't understand that it's saying Esther, and even if you don't understand that it's Morse code, you're still getting this feeling of this obsessional repetition and slight panic that he has. And again, it's kind of it's the new chapter, and it's spelling out that something has changed at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, like, that's the thing. For someone like me that don't think too hard about this stuff, I did not notice it was Morse code. I did not notice that, you know, like, what it means and stuff. But you still feel that stuff, even just playing it. Even if you don't know what you're feeling it. And that's kind of, like, why it's fascinating and why it's... I don't know. It's interesting to hear about the actual choices made to make it like this, because then it, like, clicks when you hear that. It's like, oh, so that's what I was feeling. And I mean, that's also why hearing other people's interpretations of stuff is kind of like, yeah, whatever, I guess that's cool, it can be interesting, but, like, that's just what they experienced. But when you actually hear the creator's vision of something, then it's like, well, this is what they actually intended with it. This is how they really did it. So that's why this kind of stuff is very fascinating.
It's probably the level which has changed most from the original mod. I think it's much bigger than the final level in the mod. And one of the major changes in there is in the original mod, the whole side of the cliff face was covered in painting and writing, and a lot of that moved inside to that corridor in the caves where it's really obsessionally painted on. And it was really, we spent so long on that because we were trying to get it looking right, because it's one of those really interesting examples where I loved the image and the idea that you've got this guy painting the entire side of a mountain with words and symbols and things. But it was really interesting when it went into the rebuild, it just never worked. And I think it was because the environment was so crude in the mod that those symbols and that painting became the focus of the level, and it changed the feeling of the level completely, when actually that just wasn't something we could realise in any way, that not even technically, but just didn't artistically look and feel right. And I think probably sort of retrospectively looking back on it, that's about the sort of the sophistication and the subtlety that then came into the art, rather than just being, this is literally just a canvas that we write words on, to actually the environment telling its own story without the story.
Is this part specifically the Morse code that you hear, or is it just the piano as well? Just every single short note and long note? I don't know. I guess both, probably.
Being literally painted on it.
Yeah, it was very difficult when we were experimenting with that to kind of like make it not completely unreal. Like, I think for me it was kind of, I wanted to kind of bring the player a little bit back into reality after the caves, and I think with having those symbols everywhere, it was kind of pushing them out a little bit. So I think what we came to, the kind of compromise we had, it was kind of a nice in between.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a compromise to me. It felt
really?
like, no,
Cool.
it felt like it didn't
Good.
work, but it kind of, but those symbols were coded. Like there's the hill in the background when you're standing right at the end of the boat and you look back, and you suddenly realise that the shape of the mountain is the shape of a woman lying on her side asleep. And that,
What?
really seeing it for the first time around and going, it's saying the same things, but it's saying it in a much subtler way than in the initial layer. But it was definitely challenging going back to how do you have a deep, complicated, subtle art style, but still manage to have something which is very sort of stark and symbolic laid over the top. It was much more challenging.
Right to the end near the boats. I'm gonna have to look at that, because I did not notice that whatsoever. Not at all. I don't see it here, but we'll see when I go further in.
I think one of the most fascinating things for me about planning this director's commentary has been that in previous years, when all the three of us have talked about Dear Esther, we've talked about the interpretation of the player, but actually going through this together, post having made it, we're still surprising each other.
Yeah,
And I think that's really, really interesting for me, because it shows that we left interpretation for each other, and that we trusted each other actually just to get on with it. And because we each brought our own special and unique contribution to the game, we didn't have to, in a way, talk it to death or say, you have to justify every idea you have or talk it to death or explain it. That Rob's idea that the island is very tainted and corrupt, and my idea that Dan didn't know that the whole level of the caves is a birth metaphor. I think it's really amazing that we're still finding out things about the game that we didn't know.
I think it was nice when I came onto it, because Dan was basically like, he gave me a bunch of materials, but he left me to my own devices for a lot of it, and we kind of like, I'd finish the level and Dan would play it and give me some feedback, but he was very kind of like hands off at the beginning, which was really nice, kind of. So a lot of my interpretations just came through that downtime where I was just kind of like going off and doing my own thing. And so yeah, it's like interesting to hear Dan talk about it sometimes, because there's some backstory that I've never even considered before. And obviously hearing Jess talk about it as well is really interesting, especially when it comes to the soundtrack. It makes me look at things in a very different way. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I think for me, like making games is so inherently collaborative, and you have people coming together with different ideas and different takes on things. And in a way, the least interesting thing you can do with that is to structure it all so heavily that there's no space for each individual person to bring what they're thinking to it. And I think the best games well, for me, my favourite games are ones where you can really feel the personal footprint of each individual developer and aspects of it, and it feels like it has been a genuinely collaborative exercise where everybody has thrown ideas into the mix and everybody is bringing something to the table rather than people are just following a kind of a really structured plan. So, yeah, I think it probably is one of the reasons why Esther has had the sort of life it's had since release, is because there's 4 people if you include Nigel, all bringing very different things to it, and it gives it a huge amount of depth for something that's so simple on the surface.
I both agree and disagree with that, because, like, you know, it can be a very different thing. Like, that is true for small indie studios where you have just a couple people. If you have 2 people or 3 people or 4 people or anything like below, let's say, 10 people, you can get that feel of like, oh, this is that person's contribution to this game that the others didn't tamper with, that the others didn't, like, you know, force this person to make it in a different way or something. It's like their way of adding to it and so on, and that's true. But when you get like more people, when you have multiple people doing the same kind of thing, that all kind of goes out the window. Like in big productions, like, it's not about what each individual developer wanted or provided to the scene. It is just about what everyone brought to the table, like the whole finished product. And I also don't think it's necessarily true that, like, that's the best thing, having, like, oh, let's say 3 people just adding their own third of the game, essentially. Because, I mean, there's so many games I played that are made by just one person, and they are fantastic because they are made by one person that makes everything and does everything in the way that they envisioned, and that can be very fascinating to see as well, because then, yeah, you get a very, like, distinct experience. This is this person's thing. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think what he said should be taken as a blanket statement, but it is one aspect of game making that is very fascinating. And yeah, I can definitely see that here in Dear Esther. Like, the visuals, the music, and the writing are all completely separate, but at the same time not. And that is, yeah, why it's kind of fascinating and a very beautiful game.
I'd been on holiday to Greece lots of times, and one of the things that I always really responded to emotionally was those shrines that you see on the road, and sometimes they're dedicated to saints, and sometimes they're to markate where an accident has taken place. So you'll get photos of the deceased person, with flowers and candles, and it always really touched me. And so I said to Rob, I think it would be amazing to get these into the game somehow. And then Rob took that idea and ran with it. And I think they're so successful and they're so beautiful and they're really moving. And I think it's because you had this elemental scale. You have the island and it's huge and you have that scale. And all of a sudden you come around this corner and it's absolutely brought back to the human scale again and to that relationship of the individual. And I think the other thing that it does really successfully is it's the urn. Magic realism, because there's no way that you could have all those amounts of candles lighting your way. Who's lit them? The island is empty.
Yay, there we go.
There. But I just think it's a really lovely bit of environmental storytelling, actually.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad we got the urn, even though I already got it last time. It just didn't count for some reason. Still not seeing this whole lying down woman. We'll see once I get further away.
One of the really nice things about the move from mod to the commercial version is that we had a couple of years worth of the community talking about the game before we went back into it again. And one of the things that I read on a forum was that someone had constructed this amazing version of the story where they'd decided that the narrator was Paul. And I hadn't thought of that. It was never part of the original writing. And I thought,
who was Paul again?
So amazing that as a writer, your audience can find something in what you're doing that you hadn't thought of. So it was really important when we went back in to record the additional set of voiceovers. I thought, I absolutely want to do this. I want to take this idea that's come out of the fans and to run with this and to add an entire new sort of stream of story in there. So we added in a couple of cues within the Force level that intimated much more strongly that actually Paul wasn't this other character who caused the accident, but actually you were responsible for everything. But again, it was then trying to find that balance of not overcooking it, so you weren't led to that idea. But just if you happen to have the combination of just a couple of narrative units, then you would possibly come to that interpretation. But it was really amazing to be able to say, it felt like giving something back to the fans that had enabled us to make the remake in the first place. And it's always a lovely moment as a developer to be able to recognise your fan community and kind of say, thanks, this one's yours, this one's here for you.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that it's nice to, like, get feedback on things and then be able to, you know, improve on your creation and actually make use of feedback. Now I'm definitely seeing the lying down woman. There you go. Never made that connection at all, even though I'm sure I saw it. Like, I've looked at this, but didn't see it. But I don't know about the whole Paul thing. I have no idea who that is in terms of the story.
But each of the 3 games that we've made are so strongly about religion, either the language or taking allegories and stories. Why are you so drawn to it?
I think I'm really interested in people and the stories that make up people. And I think there is like in the Bible, like most kind of religious texts, it's not about what it is, it's about what is behind what it is, and that's what you're really getting to, is the idea of the sort of the parable or the metaphor. And it really felt like, particularly with Paul on the road to Damascus, is a story that many people know and we can understand.
Didn't notice these before.
Redemption and consequence and guilt and transformation and who you really are and what that means. And it felt like just a really strong, powerful way of making it very accessible, the narrator's kind of inner turmoil, in a kind of a story that we know really well. And there's a universality to those kind of questions that, you know, whether it's, you know, Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's kind of Buddhism, that they're asking very broadly similar questions. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a good person? How should we behave to each other? How should we feel about the world we're in? And it's a really powerful way of speaking to a lot of people. I think that's always been really important as well, is that it's about saying, no matter who you are or what your kind of like outlook on life is, whether that's, you know, faith-based or secular, that we are all effectively asking the same questions. And that's why I think all our games kind of tend to be around those questions.
Fair enough. I mean, I'll say, like, I don't believe in religious texts and stuff like that, in the sense of, you know, I think there's, like, truth and whatever to be drawn from them, but I do think they can make for, like, a good basis for things. I do think there's, like, the concept of religion offers a lot for storytelling and for world building and things like that, and in that sense, I'm very interested in it, so I can see where he's coming from there.
Is Dear Esther a depressing game or a hopeful game?
For me, it's kind of like a mix of both, really. I think, like, my interpretation is kind of like, always feel like kind of depressed when I think about the kind of turmoil that this guy's been going through for God knows how long, and the kind of environment he's been in, and, you know, all these events surrounding his story. But for me, I always feel like a little bit hopeful at the end. You know, the conclusion just feels like a relief, and like this is kind of all ended in some way. What do you think, Jess?
I think it's a game about acceptance, and I really like that. And I think it's telling that a lot of people with mental health issues have responded really positively to the game, and then we get a lot of emails and letters from those people saying that it's helped them through a really difficult time. And for me, that's because it's about the struggle of being human, that it's hard and that we love and that we grieve and we lose, but we come through it. And those things are what makes us human, that it's transformative and that the pain is part of life. And that's a really beautiful message. And I think that's what you do so well, Dan. That's what you write about. You write about what it is to be human. So, Dan, you wrote it.
Without wanting to cop out, one of the things about writing it that I really wanted to do was to make something that people could take and could own, and it would be their take on it. And their interpretation of it mattered in a way that mine didn't. My job was to give them the architecture to interpret in their way. So
I think that is a cop-out. I do. I think as a writer you always have.
Yeah, I think it's redemptive. But I don't think the redemption is as cut and dried as it's all okay at the end. It's not okay at the end. But there is a release, there's an escape, that bad times will happen, but they will end. And they won't always end positively, but they will end. And that's I think, the redemption of it, of saying that
this
things are never
too shall
easy.
pass.
This too shall pass.
Which my mum always says, you know, and I think that's probably the motto of the Chinese room,
yeah,
actually,
absolutely.
isn't it?
Like, I don't think it's as kind of openly positive as, say, Rapture had a much more strongly positive end. I don't think Esther has. I think it's much greyer than that. But I think fundamentally it's about coming to terms.
The thing I'm getting from this that I think is very interesting is just this whole... The fascinating part on a technical level about this dev commentary is this, like, they're not scripted, they're just, like, talking about individual points together, and sometimes they don't even know what the other people are gonna say, so that's just very fascinating to hear them, like, discuss among themselves about what they think, like, the other people would think, and I don't even know. It's just a very fascinating format for this. I'm really liking it.
So, Dear Esther is the first walking simulator. How do you feel about Walking Simulator?
You know what, I think I took offence to it when it first became a thing. But, you know, I think actually I don't mind it so much now. I think the fact that we have kind of taken ownership over it, like that genre has been kind of made our own by not just our game, but like a bunch of different games that kind of embraced it. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I'm still really confused about the need to categorise in games, probably more than any other creative industry, and I think it shows that games have a long way to come in terms of how we describe an experience. So I do agree.
I don't know about that, coming from someone who is a musician and, like, a composer, because, I mean, doesn't music do that even more with, like, genres and subgenres and, like, so many things describing what things are in music? And, I mean, that's kind of the same thing as games do, where I think it's just kind of a human thing. We want to categorize things. We don't just have something. And I mean, it's the same with, like, movies and whatever. Like, we need to be able to categorize things so that we know what they are and can, like, share them and stuff. And if you like this thing that is of this category, then you know that, oh, there's a high chance that you'll like this other thing that is also in the same category, even though it might differ in some aspects and stuff. So I don't know about that, but let's continue listening.
I agree with Rob that it's really positive that we reclaimed Walking Simulator, but I still find it reductive, possibly, as a term. What about you, Dan?
I think for me, it's people want to know what they're buying and what they're getting into, and I think it's so people understand what a walking simulator is now in a way that if it was like first-person adventure or slow-moving, not very interactive, story-driven games, they're all sort of really very fluffy. But I think if you
first-person adventure can be very broad.
You've got a pretty good idea what you're getting, and there's Gone Home, Firewatch, Stanley Parable. There's so many other really good titles that kind of fall within that group of games out there now, that it does have an identity, and I think that's the really good thing about it. I mean, when Esther came out, there was literally nothing. We had no idea how we described it or what we called it.
We actually struggled with that quite a lot when it came to
and sort of ended up being sort of like a ghost story, because it felt like it was the closest thing we could get. But it feels like now you can make a game like this and you can say it's a walking simulator, and people will know what it is straight away.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing is there's a whole group of games out there now that quite comfortably put themselves into that category. And so it's like if we were to come out before and just said it's a walking simulator, people would have been like, well, that sounds terribly boring. That doesn't. Why the hell would I play that? But now people kind of are a little bit.
Them out.
Yeah, now people are kind of familiar with what that means. the people out there who actually seek this sort of stuff out, and it's kind of really cool. I mean, me myself, I would actually do that, use that as a term to search. But yeah, I mean, it's a very simplified term for what our game is, and there's obviously a lot more to it than walking. But I think when you look at other genres, they're also kind of very simplified. You know, first-person shooter, role-playing game. It's, you know, to me it doesn't seem as bad as any of those other things.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because, like, you know, it is just calling it a walking simulator. I guess, like, back in the day when that term was coined, it did seem to have, like, negative connotations. Like, oh, dear Esther, it's a walking simulator. It's like you do nothing but walk. There's nothing to the game. You just walk. It's so boring. It's so pointless. But yeah, like now, today, walking simulator, I feel, has like really interesting connotations to it, where for me, I seek out walking simulators because I know they're games where like the gameplay takes a step back. It's not really about engaging gameplay. It's about an engaging environment or story or experience in some way. And that's what I really like about walking simulators, especially the visual aspect, and I guess the sound aspect as well, I think are really interesting. I mean, then there's obviously stories and stuff. As I've been saying several times, I'm not like as into stories. I like stories, I like good stories, but yeah, it's much more about, like, if Dear Esther didn't look as striking as it did, I would not have cared for it at all. I can say that for a fact. The story is nice to hear and it's interesting to think about because it's in this package that is so fascinating to look at and to listen to and all that, even though it's awfully slow to walk through. So yeah, it's interesting that it became a thing, walking simulators, and I'm glad it did because I find them extremely fascinating, even though it's not like the only genre I like. I like other games as well, but yeah, walking simulators are a good shit now, and it's a good thing that it didn't really just take on the worst possible connotations of just being boring, pointless games you shouldn't even take a look at.
There's a bit of an illusion of simplicity with games like Dear Esther that people kind of assume, because there's not a lot of mechanics and there's not much going on in that sense, that they're easy to make. And I think actually it's kind of the opposite in a way, that because they're so simple, everything is exposed and everything has to be exceptionally good for it to work, because you're carrying a player's experience on a fairly sparse, minimal kind of framework, and that really means that every aspect of it has to be produced at a really high quality and has to be done with a lot of passion and a lot of thought. There's nowhere to hide in a game like Esther, and that's something which I think carries through to the best games of this type. You can see with all of them there's a real commitment to kind of depth and a really intelligent way of approaching design, and a real kind of trust in the player and a real assumption that players are smart, imaginative people who want experiences. There's no...
Yeah, right.
It's not a game that it's easy to just knock off or to do with any kind of lazy attitude. You have to be really, really passionate and care a great deal and put an awful lot of thought into it if it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, that's just basically added on to the previous devlog. It's the same conversation again.
One of the things that I think was added more frequently in the final version of Dear Esther was the inclusion of a number of ghosts in the game.
Yeah.
These are not like ghosts that you'd see in a normal horror game. They're just very loose silhouettes that you'll see around the island, usually like quite a distance off, or just kind of somewhere that you'd barely see it out the corner of your eye. I think this is a good example of where it's kind of really in your face.
Mm-hmm. This is one that you probably won't
these are
miss.
kind of just something that we put in to kind of not just bring some unreal elements to the island, but something supernatural as well, something that's kind of beyond this world, something kind of unsettling. And yeah, we've a lot of effort's been put in to make these things very subtle. I don't didn't really want them to be like, I didn't want it to be a ghost story, so to speak, but I just kind of wanted to bring some of this supernatural element into the game, and this area is probably one of the most prominent because you can see it just before you go down into the gully here, and I think it's really one of my favorite scenes just because of it being so spooky, so unreal, and so interesting.
I agree, and I like the ghosts, but that does bring up an interesting point, because they're talking about everything else in the visuals, and the island, the caves, the writing, all of that seems to have direct tie-ins to the story that's being told, but from the sound of it, from what he's saying, the ghosts are just kind of there as just an unsettling little nuance to the game, not necessarily that it ties into anything about the actual story or the game itself, which is kind of makes it interesting why they're even there. How are they justified? How do they make sense in this game? Just because it is more of a dream-like thing, it's not something that is really happening, or is it tie into the afterlife or whatever? You're supposed to realize that you're in a coma, you're dead probably, I don't even know, but yeah, seemingly that's not really why they put them in. Maybe we'll hear more about them here. Let's see.
The overlook, the point about this to me is that it's probably the voiceover in the game that kind of sums up the whole story and the experience. It's almost like a
and we don't get to hear it now.
Before you start the final climb. And it's that pause before you're going to start the final climb and before the game's kind of builds to a climax. But you can also see the whole level, and it's like the idea that you are standing looking down on your own journey, a bit like the idea of your life flashing before your eyes, or sort of seeing your body but having an out-of-body experience at the moment of death. And it was really designed to try and get that feeling as the player that you stop and you take stock of everything, and there's a bit of a sense of there's no going back. You take a breath and now it finishes. And I really wanted to kind of achieve that sort of sense, and I think we did. I think it really came together here, that you got that sense of going, right, now this ends, and now I move forwards to it.
Yeah, once again, another one of those things that you might not literally realize that that's what's happening, but you feel it, and when he puts it into words, it's yep, I can definitely see that.
So here it kind of the environment becomes a little bit more surreal again. We kind of play with the colors a little bit, bring up the saturation. It's kind of a little bit of a return to some of the more cave-like aesthetics in terms of colors and stuff like that. And it's kind of there to kind of signpost another significant moment in the game, or something that's leading up to the significant moment. It goes back to this kind of idea of having these emotional signposts in the visuals as the game, without it being overly obvious. And some of that emotional stuff comes through the colors of the environment, and the more saturated they are, the more kind of surreal things become. So this is kind of like a turning point in the game. It's kind of like the final notice of you reaching the end.
I guess.
The music that's playing here is a repeat of another cue, and originally we hear it played on the piano, and the string quartet take on the piece here. And it's one of those really nice instances where we were in the studio and I had this idea of how it was going to sound, and I thought it was going to be quite full and rich and, yeah, full-bodied. And then one of the string players said to me, this is wrong, actually, for what we're playing. And they said, let's strip out all the vibrato, let's play it in a really Scottish, plain style. And it absolutely transformed that piece, and it's one of the really special things about being a composer, is that you get to collaborate with people who come fresh to it. So you have this
Oh,
preconceived
keys.
idea of how it
Didn't
should
even
be,
see.
and then they say, no, why don't we turn it around and think about it like this? And it absolutely fits and works for that scene, because what we're getting at this point is a sense of fragility, of an ending, and it's almost reminiscent of a funeral procession. It's slow and it's dirge-like. But yeah, it was just a lovely moment where they gave something of themselves, and that's what's amazing about working with live instrumentalists. You're never going to get that from a sample.
Yeah, once again, good points. No comment, but good points.
It was possible that this last section of the game could have felt quite laborious and forced because it's two long zigzagging paths that just go up, and there was a real importance to getting it right, and quite a lot of work went into it. I think at this point for me, you probably as a player understand that the narrator's going to die at the end, and that this is it. And that unlike where the rest of the island, there's this sense of this could just keep going on forever and ever and ever, and you're going to keep the motif of come back. But I think when you set on this path,
I really want to jump down here. I really want to do it, but I don't feel like you actually would die. I feel like you would just land there and I would have to go all the way back up. Ooh, but if I don't do it, I'll never know. I'll never know. I gotta try it, right? Just once. Oh boy, this is gonna take so
I
long.
really wanted to have that sense of this is it. This is the last time.
Okay,
you're
thank
gonna
God.
walk these paths. This will end now, and that sort of idea of going, you're kind of climbing towards your death, but you're also moving towards a point where that glimpse in the caves where you see the motorway and you go, I understand what this is about. For me, the whole path up the side of the mountain is about saying, it's okay. It's that kind of starting to kind of release it and go, it's kind of okay that Esther died. It's kind of okay that the accident happened. I know that I'm going to die. I know that this is going to end. And I know that there's nowhere for me to go apart from follow this path, but that's all right. And it was very sort of hard to kind of try and find that subtle mix between the dread of it and the acceptance. It's where the positive and the negative and the kind of the loss and the redemption really start colliding for me. At least certainly that was what we were trying to achieve with it.
Yeah, fair enough, I suppose. Don't really know what I think about it in terms of like what it makes me feel, if it's like a positive or negative experience or a forced experience, or just because like you're just wondering what will lie in the next turn, what will happen when you get here. I don't think I really understood that like you were just gonna die when I first played it. That wasn't really like on my mind, I suppose, but then again, I probably wasn't thinking very hard about, again, the symbolism and stuff. I can't really remember.
With the climb being quite a poignant moment of the game overall and of the story, it was quite a difficult task to try and make that climb still interesting and not too laborious, because it's kind of this zigzag up there with nothing really. There's no real environment. You just kind of have the sea on one side and the cliff face on the other. So there was quite a lot of work that went into kind of building up this feeling of tension as you're rising and kind of making this moment as poignant as possible while still making it interesting. So a lot of effort was put into building up this weather, building up the winds and the swaying of the grass and kind of the volume of the soundscapes and everything mixing together with the music and just kind of visually really trying to make this a tense moment. And I think it's hopefully been pulled off all right. And you'll notice when you get to the top, this kind of tension dies, and that's very purposeful. You'll see no more wind. It's just kind of like a symbolic thing where you're coming to the last moment, the point of no return, and that's been very deliberately designed that way.
Yeah, very well designed in that sense, like the feelings and stuff. I also really like how, once again, the devlog, it just works so well when like you're listening to the devlog and moving through the game while listening to the devlog, and the things they're talking about happen as they're talking about them. It's like paced really well in that sense, and like placed really well. So yeah, very, very well done. I mean, the wind is still going on now. I guess it's like when you get up here. Also, ooh. Oh no. Oh no. There's 2? What? 2 I haven't gotten. Oh no. Oh shit. But where? Oh boy. And like you can't tell because there's no like, oh, all the dev commentary in chapter 1 and chapter 2. So I have no idea where I've missed those. Really? There's no more dev commentary? Like one final one? No sign off from all of them? Ooh, is that one over there? Can't even see. That looks kind of orange to me. That does look kind of orange, but that's just one. There's still another one somewhere. Oh boy. I'm not even sure. Well, guess we're going back. I really hope both of them are here. Let's see what happens if I drop down here. Same thing.
Come back.
Oh, quick respawn at least. And it did take me a little down, I think. That must be one, right? No. How can I have missed that? Yeah, this... I was kind of afraid of this, since there's 59 logs in 4 chapters. It's not really like you get... It doesn't tell you where to go to get the devlogs, so... It can be pretty easy to miss one or two. Oh boy.
With the climb being quite a poignant moment of
Now we get dev commentary in reverse.
The story. It was quite a difficult task to try.
It definitely looks
make
more
that
yellow
climb
than white, right?
Still interesting and not too laborious, because it's kind of this zigzag up there with.
It was possible that this last section of the game could have felt quite laborious and forced because it's too long.
And there was no
zigzagging
devlog
past
in
the start,
there.
and there was a real importance to getting it right. Quite a lot of work went into it. I think at this point for me, you probably as a player understand that the narrator's going to die at the end, and that this is it. And that unlike where the rest of the island, there's this sense of this could just keep going on forever and ever and ever, and you're going to keep the motif of come back. But I think when you set on this path, we really wanted to have that sense of this is it. This is the last time you're going to walk these paths. This will end now. And that
Okay.
sort of idea of going, you're kind of climbing towards your death, but you're also
Whoa.
moving towards a
Oh, I'm
point,
here.
that glimpse in the caves where you see the motorway and you go, I understand what this is about. For me, the whole path up the side of the mountain is about saying, it's okay. It's that kind of starting to kind of release it and go, it's kind of okay that Esther died. It's kind of okay that the accident happened. I know that I'm going to die. I know that this is going to end. And I know that there's nowhere for me to go.
Can't get
apart
up
from
here,
follow
I
this
guess.
path, but that's all right. And it was very sort of hard to kind of try and find that subtle mix between the dread of it and the acceptance. It's where the positive and the negative and the kind of the loss and redemption really start colliding for me. At least certainly that was what we were.
I guess I
trying to
can
achieve there.
hope that maybe if this is the last one that I haven't listened to, if that actually is true, maybe since it was 57 out of 59, it just hadn't updated the one I was listening to, because that was like the last one. It hadn't finished yet. Maybe?
So here it kind of
Oh boy.
the environment becomes a little bit more surreal again. We kind of play with the colors a little bit, bring up the saturation. It's kind of a little bit of a return to some of the more cave-like aesthetics in terms of colors and stuff like that. And it's kind of there to kind of signpost another significant moment in the game, or something that's leading up to the significant moment. It goes back to this kind of idea of
Maybe
having
one of these was just more
emotional
yellow
signposts
because
in
they
the
were like
visuals,
near candles.
without it being
and just
overly
looks that
obvious.
way.
And some of that emotional stuff comes through just through the colors of the environment, and the more saturated they are, the more kind of surreal
No,
things
that one
become.
is definitely unread.
So this is kind of like a turning point in the game. It's kind of like the final.
Wait, and what's down
notice
here?
of you reaching the end.
I don't think I've gone this way before. Right? Have I? Yeah, this is new-ish. Well. Nothing? Okay, still death.
Come back.
I'm back. Oh, I'm really back. That's a weird little path that doesn't lead anywhere. Doesn't even have any little thing in it. No little reference. Yeah, what? There's even... It's blocked off. What's up with this? What is this supposed to be? Oh, you can go up this way, sort of. But not here. No? Yeah, what a weird little area. I wonder why this is even here. Oh, shit, my stream preview, like, got an error, so hold on, I need to refresh. Yeah, okay, well, it's up again. Looks like I'm still live and all that. I guess let's just do an update. Ah! 58! It was like I said. Please tell me this one was actually yellow and I hadn't heard it. That would be very nice. Kind of completely ruined the pacing here because I missed one. Whoops. Oh no. Oh no, can I not get... Oh no, this is a point of no return? Why? Oh boy. So I just need to restart this entire chapter. Fun. I just wasted all that time for nothing. Just let me up. Come on. Oh boy. That sucks. That really sucks. Speedrun time! Let's go fast! Really missing that sprint button right now. Like I said, it would be kind of nice to just get a sprint button after you beat the game. Just like you beat the game once, and then you get a run key. Just so you can go through it fast if you want to. If you want to, like, see some new detail or whatever. Wait, why are these...
little hints and stories into it. So
why are these like orange now? Like I haven't listened to them. Are they just orange like within the same
this concept
God, it's really hard to talk while someone else is talking at the same time.
What it was saying. It also
In this run, I haven't heard these, so they're still orange.
Yeah, it's just about these ideas of hidden stories and layers, but it also starts to emphasize the obsessional nature, I think, of the story in Dear Esther, and his agitation and actually slight panic. So you're getting this rhythm that just repeats and repeats and repeats obsessively. So I think even if you don't understand that it's saying Esther, and even if you don't understand that it's Morse code, you're still getting this feeling of this obsessional repetition and slight panic that he has. And again, it's kind of it's the new chapter, and it's spelling out that something has changed at this point.
Come on, there we go. Yeah, now since all of them are orange, it's gonna be a little harder to actually find the log that I haven't listened to. If it even was here. Maybe I was just seeing things. Yeah, I'm surprised there was no, like, end log. No, like, final little bit.
What's fascinating to me, Dan, is that you're an atheist, but each of the 3 games that we've made are so strongly
like with a
about
sign off
religion,
and
either
stuff.
language or taking allegories and stories. Why are you so drawn to it?
I think I'm really interested in people and the stories that make up people. And
Oh,
I
Paul
think
on the road to
there
Damascus?
is
Like, actually,
like
the
in the Bible,
biblical
like most
story.
religious
I don't know the
texts,
story,
it's
but
not about
that
what
makes
it is, it's
sense.
about what is behind what it is, and that's what you're
Huh.
really getting to,
So
the idea
he's
of
saying
the
that, like,
parable or the metaphor. And it really felt
this
like,
literally
particularly with
is a biblical story
Paul on
that
the
is
road to
taking
Damascus,
place.
It's a story that many people know and we can understand, and it's about redemption and consequence.
Where is that
and
fucking
guilt
log
and
that I missed then?
transformation and who you really are and what that means. And
I'm really confused.
is Dear Esther a depressing game or a hopeful game?
I feel like it was, like,
It's
up
kind of
here,
like a mix
but
of both, really.
how could I get
think,
there?
Like my interpretation is kind of like I always feel like kind of depressed when I think about the kind of turmoil that this guy's been going through for God knows how long, and the kind of environment he's been in, and you know, all these events surrounding his story. But for me, I always feel like a little bit hopeful at the end. You know, like the conclusion just feels like a relief, and like this is kind
Yeah,
of
it's not
all
this
ended
way.
in some way. What do you think, Jess?
I think it's a game about acceptance, and I really like that. And I think it's telling that a lot of people with mental health issues have responded really positively to the game, and we get a lot of emails and letters from those people saying that it's helped them through a really difficult time. And for me, that's because it's...
So Dear Esther is the first walking simulator. How do you
Yeah.
feel about Walking Simulator?
You know what, I think I took offense to it when it first became a thing, but you know, I think actually I don't mind it so much now. I think the fact that we have kind of taken ownership over it, like that genre has been kind of made our own by not just our game, but like a bunch of different games have kind of embraced it. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I'm still really confused about the need to categorise
Oh.
games, probably
Oh,
more than
wow.
any other creative
That's a
industry. I
sneaky
think it
one.
shows that games have a long way
I
to
didn't
come in
even
terms
notice
of
this path when
how
I
we
went
describe
along.
an experience.
What's up with this little
I do
hidden
agree with
log?
Rob that it's really positive that we reclaimed Walking Simulator,
Huh.
but I still find it reductive, possibly as a term.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very
For me,
well
it's
hidden
people
off
wanna know
little
what they're
branch.
buying and what they're getting into. And I think
Alright,
it's so people
let's see
understand
what
a
this
Walking
final
Simulator
one
now,
is
in a
supposed
way
to
that feels
be.
like first-person adventure or slow-moving, not very interactive story. The last level ended up being quite a lot bigger
There we go.
than the original mod, and it's also the one where actually the movement around it is in a way the most artificial. There's the big zigzagging cliff paths that basically it's like a series of straight lines from point to point. There isn't a lot of movement. And one of
Am
the
I
things
even
that
gonna
was
finish
really
it? I
difficult
don't think.
to do with that was to not
guess I
make it
kinda
feel
have
too much
to.
like a corridor and to give it that sort of sense of space and that you were actually exploring somewhere quite natural. I think, Rob, there was stuff which you put in there, like little new beat moments, like the ruins at the edge of the cliff,
Yeah.
that just helped the player feel like they were on a journey rather than being pushed through a pipe.
Yeah, it was kind of just giving the player the reward for
Can I
continuing
avoid
on
this?
you know, kind of still giving them some aspect of
I
exploration.
don't think I can.
things to discover.
Can't go to the left.
I mean, the journey in this one is mostly vertical, but in the spaces where you are going horizontally, you know, there's at least in the original mod there wasn't a lot to see or do. So I just tried like layering in some very subtle things that didn't necessarily add huge arcs to the story, but just kind of added little questions more than anything
What
else.
does the minecart mean?
Like I added the dock there with at the end. There was this, there's lots of little bits and pieces that have kind of been layered in to really just make it a lot more of an interesting place despite the size.
Yeah, and a sneaky little... Oh, I could avoid it. God damn it. Sneaky final log. That was like the only log that you didn't just see on your way progressing through the game. That one, like, you kind of have to see looking back on the level. It's kind of weird that that didn't have anything to do with, like, being a secret log or a final log. But I guess in, like, chronologically it was supposed to be right there. And yeah, I was gonna say, should I even bother continuing finishing the game? But since I do have dev commentary turned on, who knows, maybe there would be like a final message after the game, the credits or something. I doubt it. I don't think it's gonna be a thing, but we may as well go all the way because we've come this far, and you know, I wanna definitively be done, and like having God, now I can't even talk. Having done everything? Can you even say that? Oh man, words. Now I'm getting just tripped up. But yeah, just doing everything that I can possibly think of doing to get closure. Can I avoid this one? Ah. Maybe. I don't think so.
It kind of, the environment becomes a little bit more surreal again. We kind of play with the colors a little bit, bring up the saturation.
And this kind of works out for me as well. Like,
some of the more
we're coming up on the end of the stream because it is very late now since I started so late. So I'm glad I could finish it all.
To kind of signpost
and like I'm now done. I can move on. And yet I didn't have to sit up until like 4 a.m. to do it.
Significant moment. It goes back to this kind of idea of having these emotional signposts in the visuals of the game, without it being overly obvious. And some of that emotional stuff comes through.
The music that's playing here is a repeat of another cue, and originally we hear it played
interesting
on
that
the piano.
no, never mind. I was gonna say interesting that even though you go down and then come back up, the music cues still happen in the same place, but they don't. It's because I restarted the level.
And I thought it was going to be quite full and rich and, yeah, full-bodied. And then one of the string players said to me, "This is wrong, actually."
It's wrong.
That this last section of the game could have felt quite laborious and forced because it's two long zigzagging paths that just go up, and there was a real importance to getting it right. Quite a lot of work went into it. I think at this point for me, you probably as a player understand that the narrator's going to die at the end and that this is it. And that unlike where the rest of the island, there's this sense of this could just keep going on forever and ever and ever, and you're going to keep...
With the climb being quite a poignant moment of the game overall and of the story, it was quite a difficult task to try and make that climb.
Yeah, isn't this the last
still
log?
Interesting and not too.
It feels kind of weird.
It's kind of this zigzag up there.
Seems like there should be something
really,
past
there's
it.
no real environment. You just kind of have the sea on one side and the cliff face on the other. So there was quite a lot of work that went into kind of building up this feeling of tension as you're rising and kind of making this moment as poignant as possible while still making it interesting. So a lot of effort was put into building up this weather, building up the winds and the swaying of the grass and kind of the volume of the sound.
Like I said, perfectly timed for the devlog and these things actually happening.
And just kind of visually really trying to make this a tense moment. And I think it's hopefully been pulled off all right. And you'll notice when you get to the top, this kind of tension dies, and that's very purposeful. You'll see no more wind. It's just kind of like a symbolic thing where you're coming to the last moment, the point of no return. And that's been very deliberately designed that way.
Yeah, and like I said, I guess that's it. That's the final note of the devlog. We'll just finish up, just in case there's some final message, but I don't think there's going to be. So when does the wind die? When you pass through here? Oh! Oh, there we go. Cool.
We had a lot of debates, didn't we, about the ending of the
And this
game
one doesn't
and
count as
whether the player
an achievement
should
log.
retain control or whether it was okay to go to a cutscene at this point. I personally don't mind it. I actually actively like it because I think it works really well as a metaphor for loss of control at that point. Dan, I know you're not as keen.
Yeah, I'm not. I would have loved the player not to have had control taken away from them, but to me it was a balance between two evils. The evil of having a cutscene and the evil of the player accidentally falling off the ladder halfway up and destroying the ending.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think we tried a few different things, and the tech at the time just wasn't, the ladder tech
What?
at the time just wasn't there, so and the other thing
What the hell
with
just
the
happened?
pacing, it was making
What was
sure
that?
all the music, the voiceovers, the timings and everything were perfect for that final jump off point, and just letting the players kind of noodle around going up a ladder for what may have been like 7 minutes because it's a tall tower was kind of an impossible task.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most valid point out of them.
One of the things that I enjoyed the most on working on Dear Esther was Rob's beautiful visuals were so inspiring, but Dan's words are always so amazing to write to. I think that's where we start as a partnership. And the music at the end was so easy to write because that last voiceover is the pinnacle of the writing to me, as it should be, because it's the last VO, so you would have failed if it wasn't good, but it is just so beautiful and moving. And for me, talking about whether it's a hopeful ending, the music is really hopeful at this point, and it signifies to me transformation, freedom, escape, acceptance. Yeah, and it was just a beautiful cue to write, actually.
I don't know, I can't remember quite where it came from in the mod, but the moment when we went, or we could put the bird in there, you could see the bird's shadow, and actually it turned from being kind of like a straightforward literal suicide into a metaphorical, or to my mind, kind of like, I always really believed the narrator did turn into a bird just before they hit the ground, and that was really important. I think it's probably the strongest ending in any of our games so far. But yeah, I'm very proud of the way everything came together in that last section.
Yeah, I think it's the bird thing is particularly interesting because I think it was in the original mod, but the timings and everything were just all off, and you never really saw the seagull. Yeah, at least the shadow as well. It was all kind of like a little bit broken. And I remember when we went back in, I made a real effort to try and get that shadow just out of the center of the view, so you kind of have this hint of something happening, and I think you can hear the sound of a seagull flapping its wings. It's like very subtle, but like I say, I kind of really like the way that came together. It kind of it's very like say it's kind of like a release, but at the same time there's still this kind of ambiguity there that's kind of beautiful.
And I'm really proud that I got the monitor in at the end for an ending of, it goes into the hospital monitor signifying the flat line, and I think it's a really...
Wait, what?
It's one of those moments where you never want to be so clever that people notice it and it takes them out of the moment, but it just flows in through the music, and it just feels like everything comes together at that last point. That last VO, Rob's amazing visuals and the music, and it feels like a really, really strong and beautiful ending.
And then in the last second, Nigel Carrington's delivery of just those two words have come back, where he just pitch perfect.
Yeah. So that's the end of the director's commentary. We'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone for listening. We hope you've uncovered some secrets and some facts that you didn't know about the game before.
Absolutely.
I'd like to say a huge thank you for buying the game, and for all our fans who've been behind us and been behind the game and have kept it alive all these years. It's a real privilege that it's still out there, still such a title that people love so much.
Yeah, and we're really looking forward to the future and what we can create coming up next. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah, that was great. That, like I said, that this is like the perfect dev commentary. It's like a completely different experience going through the game listening to the dev commentary than actually playing the game, and it's just like so much good information, but it doesn't really like meander. It's not like pointless. It's not each thing, each like nugget of dev commentary you get is just like one deliberate thing, one topic that they just briefly go over and discuss for like a minute or two, and then that's it. It's not, you can very easily have just, I mean, I hate to bring this up as a bad example, but light matter, like I mentioned previously, it just had dev commentary that at times was really interesting, but there was so much of it and so much like meandering and pointless just waste of time where it's like, oh, this is one devlog that's like 17 minutes of just them going like, yeah, but it's kind of, and then they start talking about the thing. Like, it could have been edited down so much, and I think this does that so flawlessly. There was never a moment where you felt like the dev commentary was dragging on and it was like talking about shit that didn't matter and didn't like warrant saying and stuff. And again, I don't mean to harp on light matter. It's a good game, and the commentary was good too, but I just think this is like definitely a step above in that sense, and it's something to strive for, and it made it really fun to get back into this game and play it again. Like, I don't think, if I didn't know that there was a dev commentary track, I probably wouldn't even have bothered like replaying this game or streaming it again, because I mean, maybe if I saw the achievements I would have gotten those like on a playthrough on my own at some point, but this really made it like a distinct new feel, a new thing to do in Dear Esther, and yeah, I think it's really good. So, well done. I'm like not really completely sold on their investment and symbolism and all that stuff in terms of the game, but that's how games are. You interpret them and feel the way that you feel about them. It's, up to each individual, and it's interesting to hear their thoughts about it and their takes and like what inspired them and stuff. So, yeah, I very much don't regret going through this, and good thing I could do it in just 3 streams. Not too... Wait, was it 3 streams? It was 3 streams, right? I think so. But yeah, hopefully all of the... I've been looking over, and I haven't noticed, like, drop frames, I have 0, and I don't think it was, like, stuttering too much today, but it's hard to say. I just have to ignore it. So yeah, we'll leave it off there. Dear Esther, Landmark Edition. Really, really nice addition to the game that, once again, like, I didn't even know I had this thing, this Landmark Edition. I didn't know that it had happened, because why would I know? Like, it didn't notify you or anything like that, as far as I know, so I urge anyone that owns Dear Esther to try this out and listen to the dev commentary themselves, though, I mean, if you're watching this, you've probably already heard it all. So, pointless in that sense, but yeah. Very, very good. Nice update. Rewrite in Unity and all that stuff. Not that I see, like, the point of rewriting it from whatever it was, Unreal, into Unity. I didn't really notice any, like, changes in the engine, but yeah, just the additions, the achievements, the dev commentary, that stuff was fantastic. So, I'll leave it off there. No idea when I'm gonna stream tomorrow. We'll see. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. And yeah, I'll see you then. Bye-bye!